Hinesville Part 11. The crew had been working cases for a few months. Lane joined the Hinesville crew and was a nice compliment to the team, but Vivian suspected the supervisors had planned on putting Lane in their unit. The Savannah team was replaced by detectives from other agencies, and they rounded out the squad pretty well. Vivian decided to move to Richmond Hill since, as it turned out, the team was working in the Savannah area often. She had closed on her house the day before and was moving in over the next couple of days. The unit sat at their desks reading reports and going over a few cases when Captain Sullivan walked up. He stood next to Vivian's and Cooper's desks and threw a folder down between them. "Are you two dating?" He looked down at the two detectives as he stood on the side of their desks. The whole crew turned to look at Sullivan, none of them expecting him to say it out loud. Cooper and Vivian both started blushing and looked back down at their work. "Awkward," Mason sang out, which made everyone laugh. "No, sir," Cooper muttered and glanced back up at Sullivan before looking back at his work, hoping Sullivan would leave it at that and walk away. The PD did away with the policy. Sullivan informed the pair and turned to Cooper. "Take her out." Sullivan then turned and walked back to his office. Vivian and Cooper went back to reading, trying to ignore the others who were still staring at them. Cooper looked up at them and waved his hand. "Get back to work." The group then went back to work, but a short time later Sullivan stuck his head out of his office. "Vivian, Cooper," Sullivan yelled across the squad room. Vivian stood up and looked at her team. "I guess he made us reservations." This made all of them laugh. They walked over to Sullivan's office and stepped in. "Yes, sir." Cooper walked in, closed the door, and they both stood in front of the captain's desk. "You're both taking vacation next week?" Sullivan questioned the pair as he stood behind his desk with his hands in his pockets. Vivian wondered what the point was. "Yes, I'm moving to Richmond Hill, and Cooper is going to help me." "Are y'all going out or not?" "Well, I was just planning our honeymoon." Vivian looked over and grinned at Sullivan and Cooper. "Really?" Cooper grinned excitedly at Vivian. "Where are we going?" "I was thinking the Bahamas or the Caymans," Vivian spoke wistfully as she looked dreamily at Cooper. "Lay out on the beach, get some sun." "What about Paris?" Cooper offered and joined in on the joke. "Now, that sounds nice." Vivian grinned, thinking it would be nice to go to Paris. "Winter wedding?" "I'm more partial to the fall." Cooper continued the joke. "Cut it out," Sullivan yelled, and the two giggled. "Get out of here," Sullivan grumbled, but they could see the hint of a smile. "I'll see y'all when you get back." They left and headed back to their desk for an uneventful end to the week, and soon headed out units for the last time headed home to Hinesville. "Why don't you come over to my place for some pizza?" Vivian reached over to her driver's door. Cooper mulled over her request, but he wouldn't take much convincing. "Come on, we don't have work tomorrow," she enticed him some more. Cooper looked at her as he considered his options. "All right, but remember we have a long day ahead of us tomorrow." "I know, come on." Cooper quickly conceded, and they both headed over to her house. Vivian parked and walked over to her carport door as Cooper pulled in behind her unit. "You know where the beer is," she yelled to him as he got out of his unit. "Would you get me one out? I'm going to go change." "Sure," he shouted back and trotted over to the door and went in. Cooper looked around to see the normally neat house, littered with boxes and a sense of disarray. He stepped over to the fridge and grabbed 2 beers, opening one and placing the other on the counter. She soon emerged from the back with a t-shirt and jeans on and found Cooper sitting on a bar stool at the kitchen island. "You know what Sullivan was saying today, I really don't want to start dating right now. Definitely not after all that crap from this summer." Vivian watched him as she spoke and cracked open her beer. "I know he was giving us a hard time, and a lot of people have suspected we are, but I don't think dating right now would be good for me either." Cooper was lying and she knew it. "You all packed up?" Cooper changed the subject not so subtly. "Yeah, I just have the little things left." "You want to order food, and I'll let you get to work?" Carter offered. "That sounds good," Vivian said and grabbed the cordless off of the counter. They had a pizza on the way and moved to the carport to wait for the delivery driver. "It's nice out tonight," Carter mentioned as they each claimed a chair. "It's finally fall." Vivian took a big swig of her beer. Cooper watched her and knew she was still going to Dr. Hardy 3 times a week. She took it hard, what that group had done. They both gazed out to see Nate drive up. He parked his car and stepped over to where they were. Vivian smiled over at him. Pull up a chair, Nate. How are y'all tonight? Nate questioned as he stepped over to pull a chair over to where they were. We ordered a pizza. Want some? Vivian offered. She had depended a lot on Nate. He didn't have to do any of what he did, but he did it, and Vivian would appreciate it forever. Vivian seemed to miss it, but Nate saw Cooper flinch when she offered Nate the food. I'd love to join you. Vivian stood up and stepped to the carport door. She turned to look at Nate. You want a beer? Sure, he smiled, and she walked in to retrieve a beer and called to add some sides to the original pizza order. Cooper was finding himself a bit jealous of Nate at that moment. Nate had been able to spend a lot of time with Vivian while she was down, and he knew it had made them close. Vivian quickly returned with a beer and handed it to Nate. Thanks, Viv. Not a problem. The pizza should be here soon, Vivian said, and reclaimed her seat. The food arrived, and the three indulged. Vivian didn't seem to notice it, but Nate could see Cooper felt uncomfortable. Nate couldn't understand it. That in combination with what he had done earlier. Well, I'm going to roll. Cooper stood up after he had finished his last beer. You want to start early tomorrow? Vivian asked him as he stood up. How about 9? We need to sleep in a little. Vivian nodded and thought about it. I like the sound of that. Then I'll see you at 9. Later, Cooper. Cooper walked over to his truck and soon left. Cooper picked up his phone and dialed.
What?
I think we miscalculated one thing.
Cooper began.
What's that? How much her friends would rally around her. We figured that much. What's the problem? She's gotten closer to them and a little distance from me. I won't be able to pull her away. She doesn't want to date right now. Plus, now that we're all together, she's around them more. There was silence at the other end as the man thought. Keep working on her or we'll have to resort to other methods. He's going to pull her in within a year. Yes, sir. Nate turned to Vivian. I didn't interrupt anything, did I? Vivian shook her head and took a swig of her beer. I told Cooper that I didn't want to date. After what Sullivan said today, I thought I needed to address it. Nate nodded. Do you not want to date him, or do you not want to date at all? I don't want to date right now. Vivian looked over at Nate for a sense of understanding. He nodded, and she knew he understood. I love Cooper, but not like that. But I guess a little of both. I don't want to date someone at work. I did that once, and it creates too many problems. Is it because of what happened last summer? Nate wondered if he was being too forward. If I'm being nosy, just tell me. Vivian shrugged. Yes, it has a lot to do with what happened. I have a lot of baggage right now. And with him, I just don't feel that way about him. She shrugged and shook her head. He's a great friend, and all, but I just don't feel that way. What's going on with him tonight? Vivian took a big swig of her beer. He agreed that we don't need to date, but I don't think that's what he wanted to hear. Nate nodded knowingly. He had thought about how Cooper had been acting over the last few months, since their whole beatdown. He realized no two people responded to an incident in the same way, but Cooper's reaction was just odd. Vivian looked over at Nate. I'm making you promise me secrecy on something. You got it, Viv. Pinky promise. Vivian held out her left pinky to him. Okay, nobody has made me do that since 3rd grade. Nate chuckled as he reached out. Me and Mason made an agreement when we were in middle school that if we ever knew that someone had a crush on the other one, we would tell. Vivian explained. Nate nodded in understanding. He told Mason something. Vivian nodded and sipped her beer. She thought about it and looked over at Nate. It was the only time we agreed to break a confidence with another friend. Viv, Mason is literally a brother to you. It makes sense. Don't tell him I told you that, and don't tell anyone else. I won't mention it again. Thanks, Nate. The pair enjoyed another beer, but Vivian had to get to work on packing. She quickly finished all of the little things, but seemed to have underestimated it. She slept in a nice sound sleep when she was jolted awake by a knock at her carport door. She grabbed a shirt off of the floor to pull over her camisole and grabbed her gun on the way out of the room. At 2:15?
Who's that?
Vivian stepped around the boxes on her determined trek to the door. She walked to the door and looked out the window to see Mason, standing rigged out to go to work. "Mason?" she asked as she opened the door. "Viv, I know you're on vacation, but something has come up." Mason winced a bit and looked at how she was dressed. "I hope you didn't pack all of your clothes." "Give me 5. Vivian stepped toward the back. "Y'all want to come in? We'll be waiting in the unit. It's kind of a rush." Mason stepped toward the police car. Mason climbed in the unit and looked over at Nate. She said she'd be ready in 5. "I came over last night, and she seems to be doing better," Nate mentioned as they waited. "She's doing a lot better since that one episode at my parents' house." "You know, I've been thinking about it." Nate looked over at Mason. "What happened at their house? To me, I bet she just needed to get it out." Mason sat thoughtfully for a little while. "That's actually a really good point." Mason debated whether or not to say something, and then figured it would be all right. "Don't ever mention this to her, but she told me once as kids that my house was the only place she felt safe." "I get that. We still have to go get Cooper." "It won't take long." Mason tried to assure him and looked up to see her coming out. She stepped over to her unit and grabbed her gear. She locked up the unit and then climbed in the unit with Nate and Mason. Nate turned to her with a smile. "There's a lot in store for us." Vivian smiled, and the three went to get Cooper.